You're good? All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I feel like I'm really loud. All right. Why we are a little smaller in our group than usual because our high school and middle school students are fishing over at Lake David. So a lot of the parents are over there helping out. So we're just a little bit smaller tonight, but that's okay. I wanted to ask for prayer requests as we get started this evening.
No.
Say it again.
I fell at work on Thursday, so just a little extra healing.
Okay.
Did Bill have something done? Did Bill have some surgery or something?
Yeah, he said he had some kind of operation on his shin, but I'm not sure exactly what's going on. We can pray for Sally Jackson as well. She's back home, but I'm praying for her and Bill. And then Lowry Brown is having a pacemaker put in tomorrow, and so we can pray for him as well.
Lowry is?
Yeah. Yeah, he went out on Sunday with some heart issues and we're trying that. So. Anything else?
She's not in here yet. I guess she must be taking the kids to across the way, but Christina got a job, so
Oh, good.
yeah, she got some friends.
Where is she working at?
She's going to be working with Carla at the Key to Learning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I couldn't remember.
Very cool.
Bye.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, I am, but I wasn't so I do.
All right, let's pray. God, we thank you for this evening and for this time that we have to continue to look at how Jesus interacted with the people that he came across, and just pray that we would have the same heart for people and the same heart to engage with them and have influence with them for his glory and for your sake, God. And just pray that our study tonight would help us and urge our hearts in that direction. We also want to pray for a number of requests tonight, and just of course, pray for just the continuing unrest in the Middle East, and just pray for your peace to prevail between this Israel and Iran conflict, and just pray for some path forward that gets rid of the war and the conflict in that. God, we also want to pray for Amy tonight, and just for this fall at work. Just pray for healing for her and just recovery from many injuries that are lingering. For Bill Eaton, we want to pray for him with his procedure that he had, and for Sally and Bill as well, as Sally's continuing to recover, and just grateful for the people that have been there for them and brought them meals and things. We want to pray for the Browns as well, as Lowry goes in for his pacemaker tomorrow, and pray for just a smooth procedure, but also for it to do the work that it needs to do in fixing this heart problem. And we also want to just give you praise and thank you for this job opportunity for Christina, and pray that it would be an opportunity for her just to find fulfilling work, and just pray it would be a great opportunity for her to have a great workplace and great colleagues to be there and work with. God, we pray that all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, before we get to our video portion of things tonight, I wanted to ask, what specific place do you view as being less messy or more calm or overall more comfortable? So it could be a place that you've gone on vacation. It could be your own home. What are some of the places that you feel just a sense of calmness and comfortability, maybe that you've visited or been to over the years?
Church.
Church? That's a good thing.
The beach.
The beach? What did you say? Did you say what? Oh, thanks.
Most any place put on stage.
Any place on stage, okay.
Forest.
I just bought a new home in Mascot on Gallows Lake, and my backyard is right there on it. I find myself spending a lot of time there thinking, Lord, it's just beautiful. Thank you for creating it and inviting me to share.
Yeah, you said the forest?
Arlen High.
You got a lot of nice plants and all the plants. It's really, yeah, I've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
Mountains in the summertime.
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that because we go to Georgia every summer to the mountains, and that was what came to my mind in thinking of this question. So, all right, so I'm going to pause there before we go to number 2 and do our video. If you haven't been with us yet in these sessions, we're doing a video series called One at a Time. Kyle Idleman is doing the video portion of teaching, and it's how Jesus engaged with people around him, how he influenced them through these conversations and these interactions one at a time. So tonight we're talking about how Jesus, just the proximity that he put himself in to help influence and be around people in messy situations. So we'll turn it over to the video and then we'll have some discussion afterwards.
You gotta love the view from up here. There's something about being in a tall building overlooking a city. Everything just is more beautiful from up here. From up here, you don't notice the trash. You can't see the rundown buildings and the broken windows. And from up here, things smell good, right? Like you don't get the same stench that can sometimes knock you over when you're down there. From up here, there's not much noise. There's not the kind of noise that just comes when you're too close to too many people. From up here, there's no one to hit you up for a few bucks. There's no one to honk at you because you're going too slow. And so from up here, you don't have to think about, well, all the people and all of their problems down there. Up here, things are comfortable. Down there, things are crowded. Up here, things are peaceful. Down there, they're stressful. Up here, you can relax. Down there, you're more on edge. Up here, you can do things your way, but down there, other people get in your way. Up here, things are clean. Down there, things are messy. And it seems to me that most people spend their lives trying to get up here. And people who are down there look up here and wonder what life would be like. It certainly seems easier up here than down there. And I think a lot of us who want to make a difference with our lives, we live with this tension. We want to make a difference in the world. We want to make a difference in the city, but we want to do it from up here. And I guess what I would say is that impacting people one at a time, it's pretty hard to do from up here. It happens down there. It happens in the streets. So I think for a lot of us, we can be like the person who loves to read novels but doesn't really have their own story to tell, or loves to watch action movies but has never really felt the adrenaline of our own adventure, loves to look at maps but rarely gets out of the house and never really leaves town. And as we study the stories of life change that are recorded in the Gospels, I don't know about you, but there's something in me that comes alive where I want to have those stories to tell. I want to have that kind of impact. I want to make that kind of difference out there. There's a phrase that should be a pretty good clue to us about how it happens. It's a phrase that shows up in the Gospels, or at least some variation of it shows up a number of times. The phrase is along the way. And what you'll notice is that so many of the one-at-a-time stories that happen in Scripture happen along the way, right? Like Jesus is on the way somewhere when he meets someone. Might even seem like an interruption, but it's someone who has a question or someone who has a need, someone who's confused or someone who's hurting. And I would just say most of the time, one-at-a-time stories begin along the way when you get out of the house, when you get out of the office. And if you just stopped spending so much time up here and spent more time down there, you might be surprised at the one-at-a-time opportunities that come your way. So I remember a few years ago, I was sitting in an alley just outside of Skid Row in South Central LA. And I was sitting on the curb listening to a story about this elderly woman from the Midwest who had come with her church, actually on a mission trip, and had become lost. So if you're in charge of that mission trip, having an elderly lady lost in South Central LA is a pretty scary proposition. She didn't know where she was at, and she's in this alley, and she sees a guy walking towards her, kind of this big, scary-looking dude, and you might think the right thing for her to do in that moment would be just to turn around and run away. Maybe not run away, because she's at an age where speed walking at the mall was maybe more of a thing, but at least get out of there as quickly as possible. And yet she doesn't do that. She starts walking towards him. And this guy, turns out, was a member of a gang. He had been a hired gun. He had spent time in prison. Since the age of 12, he had been involved in this life of drugs and violence. In fact, he had just gotten out of prison earlier that same day. And now she's walking towards him, and she talks to him. And he's kind of thrown off by this. And he's the guy who's telling me the story. His name's Alfred Lomas. And he said, I just wasn't expecting her to start talking to me. And she introduced herself and said hello. And then she asked him if he was hungry. He said he was hungry. And she said, well, if you show me where I am, if you help me know where to go, I'm lost. If you help me with this, I'll help you get some food. And she took him to a place called the Dream Center, where Alfred got some food, and he ended up spending about a year in a program there for guys like him. And while he was there, he experienced the life-changing love of Jesus. Alfred takes me around, and he shows me what God is doing in South Central LA, where he now oversees efforts to bring food to people who are hungry. And he also helps bring peace between rival gangs. The city of Los Angeles has spent tens of millions of dollars and passed numerous laws trying to do something about the violence in that part of the town. But Alfred is making a difference on the streets, and he's doing it one person at a time, because that's how Jesus reached him in the most unlikely of ways, through an elderly lady from the Midwest who got lost in an alley. On the night Jesus was arrested to be crucified, he spent some time with his closest followers, and he talked to them about his will for their lives. In John chapter 14, we read about some of his final words to them. After explaining to them that he would no longer be with them, he reminds them of his primary purpose. He says in John 14, verse 34, "A new command I give you, love one another." It's not a new suggestion, it's not a new idea or a new proposition or a new recommendation. Jesus says, this is my command for you. But why does Jesus call it new? Because it's not new. Loving other people was often his central message. What Jesus says next is what makes it new. He says, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And Jesus had shown them a new way to love. In fact, the disciples hear these words, I think, differently, because they hear these words with freshly washed feet. Moments earlier, Jesus had knelt down and humbly washed the dust and the dirt and the grime out from between their toes. They knew what he meant when he told them his will was for them to love others the way he had loved them. It's a love that puts others' needs ahead of our own. It's the kind of love that considers others better than ourselves. It's the kind of love that doesn't insist on its own way. It's the kind of love that doesn't keep a record of wrongs. I think one of the words that best describes the love of Jesus is this word, okay? Proximity. Proximity. At Christmas, we celebrate that Jesus loved us enough to come and be with us. That's what the word Emmanuel means. It means proximity, God with us. The incarnation of Christ, Jesus coming to earth, makes it clear that the way he loved us required proximity. It's hard to love someone if you're determined to keep your distance. If you want to live a life of impact, it requires proximity. You've got to do life down here. And as you do life down here, I can promise you that along the way, you will begin to have some one-at-a-time stories. Mark chapter 5 is an example of this. Earlier in that day, Jesus had been teaching a large crowd that had gathered around him. He spent the day teaching, but that evening, he came to his disciples and he said, "Hey guys, let's go over to the other side of the lake." I guess what's surprising about that is on the other side of the lake is what is called the Gerasene region, which was typically a place good Jews would avoid. But they get in a boat and they cross over at night and they get caught in this terrifying storm. And when they finally arrive, they don't stay very long. In fact, they just stay a couple of hours. They just had one thing to do before they turned around and went back. And just for a moment, that was a lot of work for one thing, right? They risked a lot for one thing, but that one thing was one man. A guy whose life was a wreck. He was locked up in a graveyard away from town. People did everything they could to avoid this guy, but Jesus goes out of his way to see him, to be close in proximity to him. And Jesus spends some time with this man, and this man's life is completely changed. He met Jesus, he discovers healing, and his life becomes whole. And I don't know about you, but I want to be able to tell stories like that. I mean, maybe they don't include a near shipwreck and meeting a guy who's been locked up in a graveyard, but I want to be able to tell stories of introducing Jesus to people who have been ignored and overlooked and outcast. And that's what I want for you too. But I'm just telling you, it won't happen by accident. And I mean, it won't happen if you stay up there. It will happen along the way. It will require proximity. A few years ago, I had the privilege of doing a funeral as a pastor for a lady named Brittany, a young lady. In fact, she was 17. I really didn't know her, didn't know much about her, but I was really inspired by her life. And she just had a huge heart for people. Brittany recently, before she passed, had opened up a checking account, and the first and only check she would ever write in her life was made out to Compassion International as she started to support a child. While I was at the house with the mom and dad, her mom brought me a spiral notebook and showed me a prayer that Brittany had written in her journal the night before she died. And I want to read part of her prayer to you. Brittany wrote in her journal, "God, I can't fathom how much you feel when one of your children suffers, but I've had a glimpse of your heartache. Please fill me with your wisdom that I won't just watch others suffer, but that I'll be able to say what they need to hear." She wrote, "As a new week approaches, my dangerous prayer is that you'll place broken-hearted people in my path and fill me with you so that I can let your love heal their pain." And that's a great prayer for us too. In fact, let's just call it the proximity prayer. If you've been up there, you got to get down here. It means you got to get out of the house, you got to get out of the office, and then every day you pray and you say, "God, today would you put people in my path, and would you fill me with you so that your love can heal their pain?"
Tonight by talking about places that we feel comfortable. What are some of the things that make those places special to us? What are some of the reasons we think of a particular place as a comfortable place to live in? Familiar?
No distraction.
Okay.
Did someone make it that way for you?
Okay. No fear. What else? What makes your home or your city or your favorite vacation spot a special place to you or a comfortable place?
peacefulness for one. Very nice neighbors, quiet to themselves, but always want to hello, come by, where were you, where did you want over? And it's close to my church, it's only 7 miles. And that's peaceful.
Yeah, so all of these places are places of peace or comfort or free from, nobody says, my favorite place is the dark alley that's sketchy. Like that's not, there's a sense of security or stability with all these places to us. But what Jesus often did is went to those places that other people didn't feel comfortable going, particularly with this demoniac man that we're going to talk about tonight. And one of the reasons that these destinations are comfortable to us, like I said, they're far away from the messy parts, kind of like the skyscraper that he was in. It's easy to distance yourself from all the other stuff that's going on, or even the distractions, like Ann just said. But we see that Jesus often went to places that we would try to avoid, most likely. And so we're going to do, again, what we did a couple of weeks ago, and take some time to kind of split into some smaller groups for just about the next 5 minutes or so. I know for some of you this is uncomfortable, it's not your favorite thing. But if you get groups of maybe 8 to 10, we're just going to spend some time, maybe designate one person to kind of read through this passage of Mark 5, 1 through 20. And then there's some questions there to kind of think through. And then we'll reconvene and kind of discuss those a little bit. So feel free to break up however you want. You can get up and move if you need to. And then we'll come back together, like I said, about 5 or 7 minutes. might still be in the middle of your questions, and that's okay. But I'm going to draw us kind of back together. I don't want to end it early, but I do want to kind of go through some of this too, and just talk about this a bit as a group. So I wanted to just, first of all, what are some of the questions? This is a weird text in a lot of ways, some weird things going on here. What are some of the questions that popped up as you read this that you might have had?
One question. What nationality were the people in the region?
So they would have been, I don't know nationality, but I know it's a very Gentile area. It's not a Jewish area. So they would have not had, maybe a lot of familiarity with Jesus up to this point. With that Decapolis they talk about, Decapolis means 10 cities. So it's a very populated area, big area, very Gentile population. So not a lot of Jewish people around that area. But I don't know beyond that, all the different nationalities in there.
Makes sense because of pigs.
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't have a lot of Jewish pig farmers going on, especially when it's that big.
I think in any large city, let's face it, there are the haves and the have-nots.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a guy who was below the have-nots, it appears.
Yeah, and we don't really know, I heard as I was talking, somebody said something about, we don't, how to get in this position. We don't know how he got to where he was, what led him to that point, if it was a self-inflicted thing, or he was obviously he's a victim regardless whether it's self-inflicted or not, but if he brought this upon himself, or just the demons chose him, but regardless of the circumstance, he's in a very bad position where he's harming himself, he's, can't be constrained at all. So what other questions? Anything else that kind of came up and popped up?
Yeah, we had a question of how many's in a legion?
So it's not like an exact number, but it's ranges between 3,000 and 6,000.
Yeah,
So
because as I was reading this again, and I was saying that I read it and have read it multiple times, 2,000 pigs.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, did I read that right? I'm
It's a lot of pigs.
2,000 pigs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so a legion had to have been,
yeah. Well, I think when you read it too, I'm trying to think. Was it in this one where it said that people wanted him to leave quickly? Is that because there's other parallel accounts of this? But so first of all, you lost 2,000 pigs. That's a pretty big financial deal. That all of a sudden your whole herd is desperate. Is a herd? I don't know what you call pigs. Herd of pigs, whatever it is. But also, interestingly enough, historically there was in this area a military kind of squadron, not the Legion exactly, but a pig was on their standards, that was their mascot or their symbol. So if
it was like their mascot.
Huh?
Their mascot.
Yeah. So if you think about if you're coming into this area as that army or that battalion or whatever you call it, and all of a sudden there's all these dead pigs, that makes a statement. So there's a financial loss, but also this doesn't look good for this. It looks like we just slaughtered all these pigs in rebellion to this group, so that is nothing as well. I think they're probably concerned about in this instance. So, all right, moving on. Why would Jesus be willing to be in close proximity to such a messy story when others were not? Yeah, he has this desire. It was the whole theme of this series, one at a time. He recognized somebody in a specific need that nobody else could help. He was quite literally helpless in the sense that nobody else could do what Jesus did in this moment. This one is maybe a little more difficult. Who are the modern-day burial cave dwellers among us that no one wants to be close to, or at least we're apprehensive to be close to? Say again? Homeless. Okay. Gang members. Drug addicts.
Prison. People in
Mm-hmm.
prison.
Sometimes it might even be your neighbors, because they are anti-Christian or
Okay.
they don't live like you do.
Yeah. In other words, none of these groups I'm hearing are people that you would go on vacation with or are comfortable being around. There's a lot of different situations for that. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's just uncomfortability. It's you just don't know how to interact with them, maybe. And I think all of these things that are good for us to be aware of. I don't know that we have a ton of gangs in Groveland, Florida, but there's obviously a lot of messiness, a lot of messy people anywhere you go. And so, thinking about how Jesus interacted, even with the messiest of people, I think is a good reminder for us. What was the result of this one-at-a-time moment in verse 20? I don't know if you guys got to this question as a group before we wrapped up, but what do you see? What does verse 20 tell us about the outcome of this interaction?
Everyone heard his testimony and was amazed.
Yeah, so he wanted to go with Jesus, but Jesus instead had something else for him to do. He said, go to this Decapolis, go to these 10 cities and tell, what he's done. And so he has this unique testimony that, wasn't a theory for him. It wasn't like he read an evangelism book. Nothing wrong with reading an evangelism book, but this was his story. It happened to him. But I also wanted to draw your attention to, if you go to Mark 7:31, you don't have to turn there, I'll just read it to you, but you might make note of it. It says, then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. So the next time Jesus comes to this area is Mark 7:31. And just a few verses later, in chapter 8, verse 1, it says, during those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They've already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they'll collapse on the way because some of them have come a long distance. And so this is the feeding of the 4,000. Many people know the feeding of the 5,000. And I don't know this for sure. But the next time Jesus comes to this area, the very next day, or within the next few days, he's feeding a crowd of 4,000 people in an area that he's not been before, or an area that's not very Jewish. And so I have to think that at least it's logical to conclude that a lot of these people were there because of this one man. And I think that's just really cool to see how, he went from cutting himself in a graveyard to evangelizing up to or more than 4,000 people. And I just think that's a really cool thing that we see in the story. Like I said, I can't 100% conclude that, but I think it's at least logical or reasonable to believe that that is a possibility. So I think that, we have these instances where, Jesus, in this instance, the man wanted to go with Jesus. And you'd think Jesus would say, yeah, come aboard, more the merrier. I'll take you all over the place with my crew and you can share your story far and wide. But he had a specific job for him to do. And I think as a result, he was the one that brought the news of Jesus, or at least brought attention to Jesus for all of these people to come out and hear him in chapter 8. And I just think that's a really cool connection that we see that came from, he wanted to do one thing for Jesus, but Jesus had him doing something else. And I think it had even a greater impact than he probably could imagine. So, all right, last question for tonight, and I think this one will be maybe a little bit difficult for us to think through and answer it as well. In John 13:34, Jesus said, now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. This seems so basic to those who follow Jesus, yet we still put boundaries on who gets the proximity of that love. Why? So in other words, thinking about all these messy people that we just talked about or mentioned, why is it difficult to love them sometimes?
They're not like us.
They're not like us.
Could be afraid.
Yeah, there's, I think, definitely some fear involved. Yeah.
They're just not some of them are very welcoming of the message.
Yeah.
You have to change.
There's maybe some hostility there. We want to think that we bring the gospel to somebody and they hit their knees right there and are led to Jesus, but that's not always the case.
I think this proximity kind of principle goes back to what we had last week, that you have to have God work in you so that he can work through you. And the only way to do that is to stop being outside of his proximity. Because I think a lot of us, if we, I know 5 years ago, and I was kind of like sharing that I sprinkled Jesus on my life.
Hmm.
And that's a lot different than being swallowed up by his love and knowing who he is and being known by him. And I was just reading this immensity of God and his omniscience, and I just thought this was amazing that there's 1 septillion of stars, and he's named every single one of them, and he knows every hair on every person's head. How amazing of a God that we have that wants to have that proximity to us. I'm just like, it's just such a beautiful thing. And so I think that for us to be able to go out there and share Jesus, we have to be in such proximity to him to give us that just overflowing, exuding of what he's done in our lives. Because if we don't, then we become introverted and we become distant. And that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I think the idea that you can't pour from, the phrase like pour from an empty cup, or you can't draw from an empty well, or the idea of we have to be filled with Jesus before we're trying to share Jesus with other people. Yeah, definitely. And I think, for me, I think it's probably could label under fear, but I think sometimes you start to think of like the implications, like, okay, if I start to help this person, how much help are they going to need, or how much love am I going to have to show them? Am I going to become, is it going to become more than I'm comfortable with? And we don't have this kind of proximity ideal. We want the easy, the quick fix of loving people, but love is not easy like that, and especially in circumstances with messy people. And I think, in addition to that, there's just all these other things that are layered, whatever the messiness is, there's layers of that, and it's difficult to navigate that. And if you get involved with somebody that is in the messiness of life, it's not easy to love that person for a variety of reasons. And so I think a little bit of it is, I don't know if it's fear or like self-preservation, or it's like I just don't want to get involved in. It's too messy, I want the Band-Aid to slap on it and then it's good, but that's not often how it works. And I think that, at least for me, that is probably the biggest thing that is difficult for me, is how do you navigate the messiness to love somebody well? And I think you probably all feel that in different ways. But I think this idea, and one of the reasons I like this series, is because we all have that opportunity to be one-on-one with people, and that can be people that we're close to, or people that we're not close to, or varying degrees of relationship. But all of it involves us being present and being in proximity to other people. And so, as we wrap up tonight, I wanted just to mention, he mentioned it at the end of the video, this prayer of this girl, Brittany, that he had done her funeral. To say, many of us keep the same set of friends, stay in our homes, remain near our places of business, and never really change our proximity to be in the mess of humanity around us. And so I just wanted to encourage us this week to pray this prayer, or some form of it, that Brittany had from the video. God, place broken-hearted people in my path, and fill me with you, so I can let your love heal their pain. So Tina, I didn't even make this connection at first, but this idea of fill me with you is exactly what we were talking about. This is from last week, that he has to work in us before he can work through us. And so all this is kind of building on each session together. But to pray that prayer, that God would place, or that you would go out of your way to find people that need love, to heal their brokenness, and to interact with them. And I think if you don't have to think too hard to think of 1 or 2 people already, probably, that you could be in proximity with, or you're already in proximity to help them and walk through different elements of brokenness and to love them through that. George?
Before I was here, I was going to church in Daytona, and after church service on Sunday, a group of us would go to IHOP on A1A and have breakfast and talk. And the waitress, of course, came over and says, "What can I do for you?" and so forth. She took our orders and she disappeared. Pretty soon she came back, put everything down, and she's turned to leave. And I says, "We're going to say grace. Would you care to join us?" And she says, "What?" I said, "We're going to pray." And we did. We prayed, and that was that. And then she left, and we're eating. And this woman she charges over to us, and she comes up to the table, and she says, "Who asked my waitress to pray?" And I says, "I did." And she says, "Thanks a lot. I'm short-staffed as it is." She's in the back room crying her eyes out, because she says in 30 years as a waitress, no one ever asked her to share grace with her. And she says, she asked me to come out and Different approach later.
So, but that's it. I mean, yeah, a good reminder that even a simple is praying with a waitress or somebody, that will definitely. The next time you're at Home Depot, if you ask the guy in the orange apron if you pray with him, I definitely think it's going to catch him off guard. So, but whatever it could be, I love that. That's awesome. So, one last thing before we wrap up tonight. We're going to make this announcement on Sunday, but we have middle schoolers leaving on Sunday to go to camp. If you were with us last year, you might remember we had we wrote, what did we call it? Camp Buddies or Happy Camper or something we did to write to our students as they're at camp to get the mail. And so because our middle schoolers are leaving on Sunday when we make this announcement, we're obviously not going to have time for people to write a letter before they go. So if you would like to write a letter to a middle schooler for camp this week, we have 9 middle schoolers. So Kelsey
Which means I need 9 of you.
Yes, we need 9.
Yes.
So if you would like to do that, you're writing for a specific student. Her name is on the little card that she'll give you, right?
Yep.
Yep. So
I have 3 boys and 6 girls.
So if you would like to grab one and write them a note, by Sunday, to bring it by Sunday, that would help us out, and you can grab one of those on your way out today. So that's great help to us, and we'll see you on Sunday.